Hi, everybody. I'm Mike Saunders, Vice President of Science and Innovation at Nature Sunshine, and I'm here to talk a little bit about Power Meal. Power Meal is the newest product in the Power line, and when we talk about the Power line, we have to think about metabolic health because the Power line is really all about changing our lifestyle from a foundational perspective in a way that improves our health and especially our metabolic health. So Powerline is a meal replacement, but it's a little bit different than your classic meal replacement protein that you'd find on the market. Now, I've been doing sports nutrition, bodybuilding, powerlifting, things like that for over 20 years. And I have a lot of experience with protein-based meal replacements. And the unfortunate thing with most meal replacements is just like most other processed food, they go cheap when it comes to calories. So you're going to get protein from pretty much every meal replacement out there because that's what their main headline is. That's what the most important part of the product is for most companies. But aside from protein, you're mostly going to get junk calories. You're going to get things like high amounts of maltodextrin or high amounts of things like waxy maize, junk carbohydrates that are just there to bring the calories up to be able to say, now it's a meal replacement because you have enough calories, you don't need to eat something else. The problem with that is we're really trying to get away from processed food. Processed food is one of the things that's wrong with our diet. One of the things that's wrong with kind of what's wrong with the world today is processed food. And I'm going to tell a story. I was watching TV. It was a National Geographic show like 4 years ago. And it was about people who live in Australia, the Aboriginal people in Australia. And it was talking about what's happened to them as far as their health in the last 15 years or so as they've transitioned from their traditional diet, which was more of a hunter-gatherer style of a diet, where they ate a lot of root vegetables and things like that, and animals that they could catch, to kind of a Western diet, where they're going to the store and they're buying processed food, they're buying canned food, they're buying basically junk food. And if you look at what's happened to them, because of this increase in processed food consumption, obesity rates have risen incredibly high. If you look at diabetes has become a major problem amongst these people, whereas 50 years ago it was basically unheard of. And it isn't just this one isolated group. It is groups all over the world. You look at places like Africa where they had, up until recently, a more traditional diet, and that's the continent that has the fastest growing rate of diabetes of any continent in the world. So the spread of processed food, the spread of junk carbohydrates, basically, in the absence of other healthy nutrients, healthy proteins, and healthy fibers that can help slow down our body's digestion of these carbohydrates, has led to a really dramatic decrease in our metabolic health. Power Meal is really an effort to answer that problem. With Power Meal, the thing that really sets it apart from other meal replacements is we tried to use real food as a calorie source. So yeah, you've got your 25 grams of protein in Power Meal, but it's not, cheap protein. This is high-end vegetarian protein. This is your chickpea protein, your pea protein, your rice protein, your spirulina, your chlorella, kind of superfood proteins, really. So that's one piece that separates it a little bit. Great vegan proteins, vegetarian proteins that are not just high in protein, but also high in fiber. And then we also have additional carbohydrate sources that, rather than going to the cheaper processed carbohydrates, we have sources of carbohydrates that really try to go back to traditional foods. We have things like burdock root, ashwagandha, turmeric, Korean ginseng. These types of foods that they've been consumed for literally thousands of years as a food. They're not so much consumed anymore because we've gone towards easier to eat foods, lower fiber containing foods, foods that taste better, things like potatoes and that type of stuff. We eat more of those types of things. We eat more processed foods. So we've gone away from these, but they're still great healthy foods. And almost as importantly as the fact that they're great healthy foods, they've been used for thousands of years for their health benefits as well. So now, instead of getting calories from basically junk, you're getting calories from real food, traditional foods that have significant health benefits. So this is really an effort to reverse the trend, to go away from processed food. There's studies that have been done throughout the world on people who live longer than average, basically have a longer life expectancy, better health than average. They call them blue zones. Places like the Mediterranean, they studied the diet of these areas. They studied what these people are doing different than your average person who's not living as long, who's not as healthy, who has higher levels of obesity and things like that. And what they found was across the board, increased consumption of traditional foods, increased consumption of foods that have nutrient density, increased consumption of foods that have a variety of macronutrients. One of the things that they found that's really, really critical is fiber, increased consumption of fiber. I mentioned that Power Meal has 25 grams of protein. That's great. Protein is super important, but Power Meal also has 10 grams of fiber. And this is something that's really unique amongst meal replacement proteins. 10 grams of fiber is quite high. And the reason it has those 10 grams of fiber is because it's trying to go to those real foods, to embrace this kind of blue zone philosophy where you're getting a variety of nutrients, a variety of macronutrients, and that high fiber consumption. I'm going to talk a little bit about why fiber is so important. If you look at what happens to a person's body when they're eating food, especially when they're eating carbohydrates, blood sugar rises. This is important. Sugar level in your blood is supposed to maintain a relatively consistent level. You need some sugar. It's important for fuel. Your body uses it for energy. But when I'm consuming a large amount of sugar can actually become toxic at high levels. So my body has to get rid of it. It has to reduce the level in the bloodstream, and it does that by increasing insulin levels in my blood. So I eat carbohydrates, sugar in my blood starts to go up, and insulin goes up in response. That causes the sugar to be stored. Insulin's basically telling my body to put sugar away. It can either store it in the liver, in the muscle tissue, or as fat. Now, unless I'm active all the time, unless I'm working out, unless I'm burning sugar, pretty much the sugar in my muscles and the sugar in my liver is kind of staying constant. I can't really have that much sugar stored in muscle tissue or in my liver. Where most of it gets stored is actually as fat. So if I eat sugar and then I get this blood sugar spike, I'm storing most of that sugar as fat. And then the interesting thing is that when I do this, I get a large blood sugar spike after eating the sugar. And then because I have a strong insulin response, especially if I'm eating sugar without other nutrients to slow down the absorption, I get this strong insulin response, and that causes a dip in my blood sugar. So even though I've eaten a lot of calories, I've eaten a lot of sugar, I store it, and then I get low blood sugar, and I feel hungry again. So I eat again. And this happens over and over throughout the day. I get these blood sugar spikes, blood sugar trough, feel hungry, and eat again. And over the course of the day, I've eaten more food than I need, but I'm hungry. So I tend to gain weight. I tend to be less healthy. I tend to have these chronic high blood sugar, chronic high blood insulin levels. And over time, this leads to desensitization so that my body is no longer as sensitive to insulin as it used to be. And then I have more and more and more long-term chronic problems that are associated with metabolic health. So what can I do to avoid this? Fiber is one of the most important things that I can be consuming. When I consume carbohydrates with fiber, it's a totally different story. Instead of having that big, strong spike in blood sugar, that spike is much smaller. It's lower. And because that spike is lower, I need less insulin to respond. Because I need less insulin to respond, it tends to have a longer duration of sugar in my blood without that trough afterwards. So this is really the difference between drinking orange juice and eating a whole orange. There's been a lot of studies on the difference between juice and whole food. And one of the key differences is that fiber. There was a study that was done not that long ago looking at actual orange fiber, the fiber from an orange. And what they did was they juiced oranges, and you're left with orange juice, and then you're left with what's called pumice, which is basically the fiber, all the insoluble stuff. They dried down the pumice, and they had somebody drink orange juice and measure the blood sugar response. And then they put that pumice back in the orange juice and had the person drink the orange juice with that pumice back inside, that fiber and all the other good stuff from a whole orange. And you actually end up getting a blood sugar response that's mimicking eating whole food, eating that real food. So that 10 grams of fiber that's in Power Meal, it basically gives you a healthier glucose response to your food. It slows down the absorption of the calories that's in Power Meal. This gives you that healthier glucose response. It gives you less of an insulin response, and it also, because you're delaying that absorption of those calories, you're slowing down the absorption of those calories. You feel full for longer. You basically have prolonged energy, which allows you to go from breakfast to lunch without having a snack in between. So Power Meal, it's kind of the perfect breakfast. You're getting the protein that you need, you're getting carbohydrates that are healthy, and you're getting a slow absorption. Now, you're also, as I mentioned before, the food that's in Power Meal is real food. It's traditional food. It's food that's been consumed for health benefits for a long time. So you're not just getting calories, you're not just getting macronutrients, you're not just getting protein and carbs and fat and fiber. You're getting a diverse array of micronutrients that can really help optimize your health in a way that your normal food that you're getting from the grocery store can't do so. I'm going to talk a little bit about grocery store food, because as much as we try, it's really hard for us to be healthy. Most people aren't eating enough vegetables to begin with. They're not eating enough fruits to begin with. They're eating, as I said before, too much processed food, but they really are not getting a diversity of phytonutrients. If I go to the grocery store, I see things like cabbage, I see things like broccoli, I see things like kale, I see things like Brussels sprouts, and I might be thinking, okay, I'm getting a diversity of vegetables. If I eat all of those, they're all actually the same species. They have similar phytonutrient composition. They were bred to look different and to have slightly different characteristics, but they're literally the same plant. This is something that we've done with our food for the last several hundred years. We've pushed it to become what we want it to become. Even if we're eating vegetables from the grocery store, we're getting less fiber than we should because we've bred fiber out of our food. We're getting less nutrients than we should because food is grown for the purpose of profit. It's not grown for the purpose of health. So the soil that the vegetables are grown in, it's depleted from many of the organic acids that need to be in there for healthy phytonutrients to be present in the vegetables. All that we put in the soil is what is needed to make the vegetables grow large, to make them full of sugar, to make them taste good, to make them sellable. That's the most important thing when it comes to food at the grocery store, is that people buy it. They just want to make that profit. They don't care about whether you're healthy or not. So again, Power Meal, it's a throwback to real food, real nutrition, something that can truly increase our health, something that can help us become more metabolically flexible. And that's a really important term, metabolic flexibility. I mentioned before what happens with our body with blood sugar and insulin. Now, as long as insulin levels are high, my body has to be storing. So I'm eating food, I'm storing it as fat, and then I'm eating more food, I'm storing it as fat, but I can never access fat as an energy source because I have chronically high insulin levels. If I'm able to control insulin levels better, I'm actually able to access fat as an energy source. So if I need to skip a meal, for example, I'm not going to immediately start getting so hungry that I get angry. I'm not going to get cravings the same because my body can just access fat as a fuel source. So Power Meal, again, high fiber, high protein, high nutrient density, traditional vegetables that are not just vegetables, but that are traditional foods used for their health benefits, it's really an optimal food. It's something that can take a huge step for us towards becoming healthier, towards having improved metabolic health, towards having increased metabolic flexibility, because it's not just a supplement. It is true foundational nutrition that can really put us on a path towards becoming our best self.